Okay, everyone, I'm going to teach you about the image transfer technique because we want to get from this handout that I've given you, which is a picture of a glass that shows like all the areas of highlight and shadow, and it'll be really complicated. We want to get this image onto one of the 5" by 5" squares of paper. And you might wonder, how do I do that? Now, it might, some people out there might be able just to look off this and draw, but that's really tricky. So I'm going to teach you a really cool way to take this and get it onto this heavy duty paper. And you can't just trace it because it's too thick. See, if I look through, it doesn't matter how closely I look, it's too thick, I can't trace through it. So what I need to do is I'm going to take my sheet of paper, and actually, if I have it on our white table, or if it's too dark, if I need to like put a page of my sketchbook underneath it, but if I put it on a pretty light colored background, then I should be able, because it's pretty cheap paper, to flip it over. And look, I can see the glass, if I press it down, I can see it through the paper still somewhat, right? So that's really nice. So on the back of that paper, I'm gonna take my 6B pencil, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and, with a decent amount of pressure, I'm gonna scribble a thick line over top every line of my drawing. So I'm gonna look, and wherever I see the drawing showing through into the back, I'm gonna go and I'm going to go over it. Now in some areas, it's like I only need to go and make sure I get over the line, but I have to make sure I cover up the line. Like that line has to be totally covered by the graphite in my pencil. And so I'm using my 6B pencil, and I'm going through and I'm double checking, and I'm kind of scribbling over, and I'm kind of holding it at an angle. I'm kind of with an angle going over and scribbling over all the lines. Now here I've got a bunch of little lines, and that might be hard to get every line, so I'm just gonna kind of scribble over that whole area so that it's done. And then I missed a line up here, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I've scribbled over that line as well. I'm gonna go down the side, but I need to make sure that every line has been covered up by scribbling. And when I'm done, it's gonna look something like this. So I've finished it, I've covered every line. So if I flip it over, it doesn't look like anything, it just looks like my glass. But on this side, I can't see any of the lines anymore because I've scribbled over all of them. All right, so that was with my 6B pencil. That was really important, 6B, and I scribbled everything. Now I can take this with the back, I still wanna see, like this is the front, I'm gonna flip it over so that I can see my scribbling. And now I'm gonna take my watercolor paper, and I'm gonna kind of get this glass centered. I'm gonna try to kind of center it in between the lines of my paper. Now, if this is hard for you to see, if you need to cut out along this square, if that makes it easier for you, you can do that. I've got the lines pretty decently. I'm gonna cut it really, really quickly, just so you don't have to sit around and watch me do this for a long time. And the image might not line up 100% perfectly with my paper square. I got them close, but not exact. So I've got this, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put my paper, and I'm gonna kind of line it up so that they're all together. So I've got watercolor paper back here. If I flip it over, I'll see what was printed. My scribbling should be inside, in the middle. That's really, really important. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I got clean paper. I'm putting this over it. And I can tape that together. So I could grab my roll of tape, and I could grab, 2 pieces of tape to kind of hold this together. I'm gonna put tape here on this side, tape here on this side, and then I can just kind of like wrap the tape around and fold the tape around. So now this is here, it's good, okay? So again, it's not gonna move, which is great, but if I look underneath it, my paper's empty. However, if I go ahead and I lower this, now I can take my 2H pencil, 2H, and I'm gonna go in and I am going to really, really carefully trace all these lines. I'm just gonna go right over my drawing, but I'm gonna press down hard. So I'm gonna press down, and I'm gonna trace the line. Now the difference is now I am not scribbling. I am tracing every single line as I see it very, very carefully, and just going right over it like I'm doing an exact copy of the line. I gotta make sure I'm not missing anything. So I'm tracing every single line, and I'm putting pretty direct pressure onto my pencil. Now look, if I'm doing this well, I'll lift this up. It is gonna push the graphite down for all this scribbled stuff. The pressure is pushing it down onto my watercolor paper. So the image is appearing everywhere that I trace. So wherever I go over a line, I'm gonna do this little curve over here. And now that curve magically is here on my watercolor paper. So I'm gonna go in and slowly trace every single line of my glass. Go nice and slow so you can keep track of what you've done, which can be hard at times. And it's starting to show up. So I'm gonna have to go in now and do every one of these little lines, but if I do a line, and I draw it just as I see it, and this is where it gets tricky and a little hard to remember what I've done. So I have to be really attentive to every line that I've drawn. But if I'm going in, and I'm going kind of fast, but I want you to slow it down, but I look and okay, every line is showing up. Now they might not be perfect. I may need to go back in later if I didn't scribble or have good coverage. I can go in, I can clean those lines up a little bit. But for the most part, every line that I did, if I scribbled over it, if I'm tracing now, yep, is gonna show up on my image. So you're gonna go ahead and do this over the entire image so that this entire glass, including this little shadow out here and the line of the horizon behind it, all of those lines are going to show up on my final drawing. That's gonna be really important. So I'm just tracing down, and this is what's called an image transfer. I'm transferring the image from one paper to another simply by exerting a little bit of pressure, all right? So you're gonna go ahead, it's working, and do that now. That is how you will get this glass onto your watercolor paper.